The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey everyone, Michael Zapersky here, and today I'm with Tom McMakin. Tom, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on. So Tom, you're an author, a speaker. You're the CEO and partner of Profitable Ideas Exchange, where you help expert services firms with business development. Your company has conducted over 10,000 best practices interviews with senior executives at over 350 Fortune 500 companies. Before that, you co-founded a private equity firm and you worked as a chief operating officer. Your work has been featured in Fast Company, Inc. magazine, Wall Street Journal, a whole bunch more. You also have a new book that came out recently. We'll talk more about that. But let's dive right in because there's a lot to cover, Tom, and I'm excited to have you on. When we talk about consulting firms, professional services firms, most people think kind of about two ways of growing business. Number one, from new clients, and number two, from existing clients. In your experience, which do people spend most of their time kind of thinking about and focusing on?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we wrote the book, How Clients Buy, to answer the question, how do you bring new clients into the fold? And we interviewed a slew of people in professional services and consulting firms to ask that question. And we wrote the book and it was well received. But then I got this incredible feedback from the consulting world that goes, that's nice. But if you look at our new revenues year over year, 80% of our new revenues come from existing clients. So new logos are fun, but tell us how to land and expand.
Right. Got it. So given that's the case, what is the recommendation that you typically have? So let's say I'm running a consulting firm and now I understand that, yeah, you're probably right. Most of my business has kind of come from referrals or kind of existing clients. What do I do about that? What's the first thing that somebody should start to think about or look at? What kind of maybe analysis should they even run to identify, do they have opportunity to grow their existing accounts? Any kind of exercises or best practices that you can offer?
I think it's helpful always to make distinctions and not just look at that big block of a challenge, which is how can we increase our business? And one distinction you could make is, am I trying to do more of the work that I have already done for a firm for the buyer in that firm that I now serve? Mm-hmm. So for example, if I stand up a conference for a buyer in the general counsel's office once a year, I could go back to that same buyer who knows me and trusts me and knows my competence. And I could say, you know what, we could do your spring conference as well. So that'd be more to the existing buyer. But the adjacency to that, if you will, is to sell more of the same thing that you've sold already into a company, but into other divisions or other business units or other geographies. That's a distinction. And then there's a third kind of type of new work that you can get. And that's where you offer conferences for the company, but someone else in your business is quite capable of writing pithy and compelling newsletters. And so you want to introduce newsletters either to the people that have just bought conferences from you, or even harder, sell newsletters to people in the organization that you don't now serve. So you can kind of think of it as a matrix, if you will, in that way. And as you can imagine, the easiest thing to do is to sell more to somebody that already knows and trusts you. And it gets harder to introduce colleagues or other capabilities in your firm to a firm that you're serving. And it's harder to reach outside of the vertical that you're now serving in a client to other verticals. And so there are different tactics that help us scale those two walls, if you will.
Right. The other thing that you found is that the kind of Pareto principle holds true in business development, that 80% of the business and profits typically come from 20% of a firm's clients. Tell me more kind of about what you've observed with that and kind of how does it hold true? I mean, I must admit, it's not surprising to me because I think the Pareto principle applies to so much of life and science. But I think it was just especially interesting to kind of hear your take regarding business development. Can you just dig a little bit deeper into that and kind of share with everyone what your findings were?
Yeah, so I interviewed a head of strategy inside a massive IT integration professional services firm. So think kind of $15 billion. And they had two businesses, the technology half and the consulting half of the business. And each half of the business had forced ranked their clients. Who were their best clients? And like you said, that 80-20 rule kicked in. So 20% of their clients on the consulting side produced 80% of their revenues. And likewise on the technology side, 20% of their clients produced 80% of the revenue. But I think what shocked me and shocked this head of strategy is there was precious little overlap, 20% overlap between each group's major clients. So if the consulting side, their number one client was Pfizer, the technology side did no business with Pfizer, and vice versa. If the technology side of the business's major client was AWS, the consulting side of the business did nothing. And so it speaks to what is called the cross-selling problem. And in the previous kind of matrix that I outlined, that would be the problem of introducing other services to a client that you already serve. Anyway, it's interesting. And I've seen that over and over again.
Yeah.
We develop consulting practices, mid-sized, small consulting practices even. It could be a 3-person firm, and I have a specialty, and you have a specialty, and Jane has a specialty, and there's very little overlap between our various practices. Yeah. And, so one of the questions is, how do you solve that?
Yeah. So let's kind of like dig a little bit deeper into that to make this really actionable for people. Likely they're going to be seeing that in their business as well if they've been in business for some time. So let's just even take your firm, Pi. When you look at your clients and you see there's some distribution of 80-20, maybe it's 70-30, 90-10, whatever, but there's some, kind of Pareto principle that is playing out. What do you do within your company? What kind of actions do you take? How do you rally the troops? How do you move forward knowing that that is kind of the distribution of clients to revenue and profits?
I'll offer up 3 things. So when a person that does a project wants to do more of that work for the project manager that they serve, it's generally pretty easy. You have to kind of reverse engineer when the budget process is. So if the budget year for your client ends in the end of September, you might reasonably ask, when do you start planning? And you'll get an answer of, well, we always have to sort of submit a wish list deck around March, and then the powers that be decide on how much money we get. And we have found it helpful to get on top of that cycle. In March, call our program manager and say, we do a number of things for different clients. Would it be helpful for us to sort of brainstorm other things that you might do to sort of further your objectives and put it in the form of a slide deck? And I'm surprised 8 out of 10 times the program manager just lifts our slides and puts it in their deck and passes it on. They're grateful. In the case where you're trying to do the same work for a client, but in a different business unit, it's harder than you think. And one of the reasons that it's hard is that your program manager is pretty darn proud about the success that you and she have put together. And, they're not always eager to share it with people that might be in competition for them for the next job up. Or even worse, in a global corporation, they flat don't know who their counterparts are in Berlin, or they don't know who their counterparts are on the technology side of the business. And so they can't be helpful to you. And at the end of the day, they're doing you a favor. That is to say, they're taking some political risk within the organization, but with very little return to them. So we have found it successful to have a kind of second partner on every assignment. And that's a senior partner. And that's what a lot of the big professional services do. They have an implementing executive and then a senior partner that flies in every once in a while and says, is everything going well? We have that senior partner level up above the program manager and talk to the big boss and say, is this really working for you? How do you feel about the ROI? And by the way, would you mind introducing me to other people that report into you? And it eliminates some of the problems that we see. I think the last thing, and people have been doing this forever, is when we're trying to include another capability in our offering set, oftentimes we'll take out our program manager for dinner, and at the last second we'll say, hey, do you mind if I bring Michael along with me. He's my partner. He does the training half of our business, but we're in New York and he's got nothing to do tonight. And then we introduced him. We're like, well, so Michael does a ton of training for consulting firms across the country. His specialty is sort of small and mid-sized companies. He's seen tremendous success. But Michael, I'll let you introduce yourself. And then Michael asks a question of the client. I got to ask, what do you guys do for training? Anyway, and there's a transfer of trust and a transfer of kind of trust around capability that occurs there. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I think it's really valuable for people. So thanks for sharing that. You touched on, Tom, about maybe one or two reasons why clients within an organization hesitate to refer you to their colleagues within that same organization. What can be done so you mentioned, you can have a senior partner fly in, spend more time with a higher level partner. But let's say that you don't have that ability. Maybe you're running just a very small firm. Maybe you're a solo independent consultant. You're doing great work. You know that because you keep hearing that from the clients. Maybe you've been kept around for a year or two, but you're unsure of how to move deeper into that organization. What would be some recommendations that you would offer for people to kind of consider or explore that might help them as a solo independent or small firm to be able to kind of get their tentacles deeper into that client organization?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple strategies. One, or tactics really. One is not to ask for a referral from your program manager that loves you so much. That can be hard for them and they can not get to that. We've all had the experience of talking to somebody and they say, yeah, I'd be happy to introduce you to Bob. And then it never just happens. I think a better use of those people, take them out to lunch and to think of them as seeing eye dogs and go, hey, I'm curious about the wider organization and I'm interested in, frankly, selling more of my services like I do for you elsewhere in the organization. Tell me what's going on. Like, what are the strategic priorities of the company? Are there divisions that they're putting money into and not? Are there group presidents that are old and tired and about to retire and aren't taking any risks? But are there also young whippersnappers that are about to sort of take over and want to make a name for themselves? Just tell me the lay of the land. That's all I'm asking for. Another thing I think we've learned over the years is a foundational principle of all business development, which is own the action. Own the next step. Never leave the next step in someone else's hands because it's not as important to your program manager to grow your book of business as it is for you. And so one of the ways we do that is go, I was wondering if I might use your name as a reference when I reach out to your counterpart in Berlin. And I'm also wondering if I could sort of include a short case study, which I'll send you for review. And then you own the action. You figure out what the email is. You write Hans and you copy Marcia, your program manager, with the case study and say, I've worked for Marcia for a long time and I've admired at a distance what you're doing, Hans. It seems like we might be able to help you in a similar way we've helped Marcia. Copy Marcia and then say, with your permission, I'd like to follow up with a call. So owning the action, I think, is just a crucial habit.
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. A lot of this is kind of predicated, Tom, on having that existing relationship, right, with the existing client, which is what the new book is about. What would you say to those who don't yet feel they have that relationship with someone. Maybe they've been kind of prospecting, they've been having a bit of reach outs, not a lot of success in actually sitting down at the table with someone, but they want to find out more about their budget so that they can provide some ideas and some potential ways to serve and support them. What advice do you offer to professional services firms that want to essentially generate more quote unquote leads, more opportunities to have conversations with people they don't yet have relationships with? Like, what's working best to kind of get a seat at the table?
Yeah. So, I have a bunch of thoughts on this. One is, I think, narrow cast, right? So shrink the pond, be number one in your pond. You don't want to go to the world. I mean, you're in the training, consulting, and coaching business, the education business, and you have shrunk the pond, Michael, to just focus on people in professional and consulting services firms. And so that means you're not focused on helping, retailers do a better job of reaching out to customers and selling more shoes. Sure. And so by delimiting what your stated area of expertise is, your domain, you're able to sort of niche yourself and create a brighter identity, one that's memorable. Oh, yeah, there was this guy that does coaching for consulting firms. Cousins. They were cousins. I remember they were cousins. Yeah. And they're in Canada. Anyway, they can find you that way because they know who you are. So I think that's the first thing, is stop trying to boil the ocean. Figure out where you've sold 2 or 3 projects well and where the through line on the story is. We did some work for a mining company in Nevada. Then we did one in a mining company in Edmonton. I think we sort of have the right to sort of reach out to other CFOs of mining companies in North America. Let's figure out a list of those folks. Oh, there are only 200 of them. What's the function that we sell into? Well, sometimes the CEO knows somebody and we get in that way, but really it's the chief supply chain officer that pulls the trigger on what I do. So let's figure out the names of the 200 chief supply chain officers of the top mining companies and set ourselves the objective of getting to know them over the course of time. I think that's the biggest single piece of advice that I would give people, is niche sharply, invest in the conversation, give without expectation of return to that limited community, just like you're doing, Michael, right? You're giving this podcast, you're giving your expertise to the community you most want to serve. And in that way, you're elevating yourself not only as an expert, but as a bee that's cross-pollinating best practices between all the work that we do in the world of consulting.
Yeah. And my daughters love honey. So it's a good thing that I'm a bee, because lots of sweetness for them. But no, that really aligns and resonates, Tom. So, in your new book, Never Say Sell, you say, quote, "We hit on the immutable wall of diseconomies of scale. In some business, the costs of production go up, not down with growth. As it turns out, expert services firms also face diseconomies of scale, and understanding and overcoming the diseconomy of scale present in your industry is key in growing our work with current clients." Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean about that diseconomy of scale and how it relates to kind of expert and professional services firms?
Yeah, so economies of scale are if you build a plant and it costs you, or whatever, it costs you $1,000 to create one widget out of that plant. It's got so much more capacity. And so when you run 1,000 widgets through that plant, the cost of that widget goes down to $1. So that's economies of scale. And on some level, we suffer from the opposite in our world, because like massage therapists and psychiatrists, the only way we get new work is by increasing our time, and we hire people to serve clients that we work with. And that's how we augment our time over a period. The problem is that those people require management and training and houses, or whatever, offices and all sorts of support. And then that kind of drives a diseconomy of scale. Actually working out of your guest bedroom as a sole proprietor is monstrously efficient. Your overhead is, almost nothing as you kneel down, crawl under your desk and fix your own IT by detangling your wires. That doesn't exist at like a McKinsey, where they have a whole raft. They have a whole department of 500 people whose job it is to keep computers humming across the globe. So I think that's what I meant by diseconomies of scale.
And so based on that, because that definitely does, I think, connect with what a lot of people are dealing with as they're growing, kind of scaling up their own consulting businesses, right? They're looking to add more people or more whatever it might be, and more can often translate into just more complexity, right? And complexity doesn't scale very well. So knowing that, what's the way to overcome that? So as you mentioned, like the key to growth is learning how to overcome the diseconomies of scale. So for you and your firm, is there anything that you've done specifically that you found has been helpful in overcoming that challenge to allow you to scale or to make a greater impact and maintain profitability and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, we raised our prices. And I mean something very specific about that. A sole proprietor doesn't have, even if they spun out of IBM and they were somebody in charge of digital transformation, they don't have the right to take on a global digital transformation project for General Motors. They just don't have the capacity to do it. They don't have the people to fly around the world and make it happen. And so sole proprietors tend to take on smaller gigs, and those smaller gigs tend to be more, the barrier to entry is lower, and consequently they tend to be bid more fiercely, and the margin or the price on the services are lower. As you scale a company, so our company we're not a sole proprietor, but we're also not really big, right? We have 60 people in our company, but it gives us the capacity to take on a kind of national or global contract, particularly for a business unit, and cover it up with resources and execute well. Well, I think that the truth of the matter is when you do big projects like that, you're allowed to charge more per unit of cost because there is baked into the world of pricing and competitive pricing. There's an understanding that there are those overhead costs that get baked into any bid.
Right. You mentioned that one of the things you did was increasing prices, right? So that's a really great approach and strategy. Is most of your pricing in the projects that you work on in the engagements, is it on an hourly basis, a daily kind of rate? Is it a retainer? Is it project based or using kind of value and ROI? How do you guys approach pricing, and has that changed at all over time?
Yeah. So we're like scared to death to price on hour, cost plus. And we refuse to do that. We do everything on a project basis. So we say, what are the outcomes? We're going to drive business development by creating cohorts of likely buyers and putting your practice leads in the center of a series of conversations. We're going to recruit a certain number of people, and you don't need to know what happens behind the curtain. And so we price by project. And that gives us, otherwise you're defending hourly wages and you're tracking time. Like we don't track time like a law firm. And everybody that I know in professional services that tracks time, lawyers and accountants principally, are desperate to figure out how they can get out of that world, out of that box.
All right. So Tom, you mentioned that boutique, smaller firms should focus less on innovation and more on other ways to grow their business. And when I read this in your book, it really resonated because I think a lot of people do believe like, hey, I need to be innovative. I need to come with new ideas, always kind of sharing new stuff with clients. And so I wanted to hear from you a little bit more about when you say that a boutique, smaller firm should focus less on innovation and more on other ways to kind of grow their business. What do you mean by that? And what do you kind of find in your conversations and research?
Yeah. So, I think we'll go back to that example of mining, right? So you did some good work for a mining company in Nevada, and then you did some good work in Edmonton for a mining company, and you write up some case studies and you think, I'm going to get to know all the chief supply chain officers of the 100 biggest mining companies in the country. I'm going to go to the conferences. I'm going to try and present. I'm going to publish. I'm going to set up roundtables. I'm going to do a podcast. I'm going to engage and add value to this group of 100 people because you know what? This could be a $50 million business if I did that. So over and again, you see people doing that. They invest in that way. They get another mining client. They get 2 more mining clients. They hire someone from a mining client to add to their staff to be a consultant. And then someone goes, you know what? This vein, no pun intended, that we're mining right now is so profitable and no one else is mining this vein. How about we spend some time and resources to figure out what else we could do in this world? And, it's sort of silly as long as the vein is continuing to produce. You've invested 10 years of time and momentum into sort of establishing yourself as the preeminent supply chain consultant to mining companies. Your consumer product's good vision for what you do is a distraction. So now here's the deal, is that founders have this disease the worst. Follow-on professionals don't have. They sort of see the virtue of grinding away at a niche that they've established for themselves. But founders oftentimes are very creative. And they're like, this was so much fun. I've got another idea. My expertise could be used to help transit systems in the Far East. So I'm going to start dabbling in that world as well. And then they never get any momentum and they never get any scale and they never really get a reputation in the industry for excellence. And so I think, until you have 100 employees or so, the chances are what you should do is focus on the one or at best two niches that you figured out that you can own and do well. And when I say own, I mean as delimited by expertise, supply chain management, industry, mining, and maybe geography. I'm focused on North America, with the exception of Mexico. But I don't do any mining projects in Brazil or Africa because that just means I live on a plane all the time. So delimiting in that way takes time to sort of build a reputation, but don't fritter it away.
So powerful. I was just sharing this kind of a similar concept with clients in our Clarity coaching program from a marketing perspective. So often people will start to do some marketing. They see it working, go, oh, okay, this is working pretty good. Like, what else could I do that is different that might work even better? And they take their eye off the ball of what's already starting to work for them. And so I think whether it's playing out from a specialization and focus perspective or service offers perspective or marketing perspective, that focus and that consistency is so important. Tom, I want to thank you again so much for coming on here today, sharing some of the research from the book and what you've been seeing playing out in the space, which I know you've been in for quite some time. And so I want to make sure that people can learn more about the new book and about the work that you guys are doing. Where's the best place for them to go?
You can go to our website, profitableideas.com, and our services are there, and the books, How Clients Buy, Never Say Sell, are there. But I mean, it's available on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and either of those books. Yeah, you can find resources there. We have a blog on our website. We continue to sort of generate some insights based on interviews. But I'm a big fan of your work and your book. So when you're on Amazon and you're buying Never Say Sell, I want you to reach out and pull in some of Michael's books as well.
Much, Tom. Appreciate that. Great to have you on, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.